So welcome everyone to the Thursday evening class, and for the benefit of those who are new, I believe there's someone, I just go briefly through the meditation technique. Meditation works with the part of ourselves that is often neglected. The reason we neglect it is it's not so obvious for us to see. It's not something that we could go to our doctor and get an x-ray of, so we tend to ignore the things that we cannot see too easily. But the thing I'm talking about is our awareness or our attention, which is often drawn away to the things around us in the world in a way that when it comes to time to bring back our awareness to where we want it to be, somewhere within ourselves, sometimes it's quite hard to do that. We're so used to having our awareness caught up in the things around us that it is quite hard for us to bring it back to a place within ourselves where it needs to be in order to rest or recharge. Meditation offers a way for us to do this, and although there are many different ways of meditating, in essence they are all ways to re-internalize our awareness from the things that tend to rob us of our attention in the outside world. And generally the way meditation achieves that is to focus on some sort of object within ourselves which can act as an anchor for the mind. So, for example, a way of meditation that you might have heard of before, meditation on the breath, would instruct you to focus on your breath as it's going in and out within the space of your body, as a way to tempt your mind back from all those things in the outside world back to a place within yourself, which is quite effective, except for the fact that the breath is always on the move, so it's like shooting at a moving target. What we generally do at this meditation center is even simpler than that, which is to focus on a place within ourselves by means of some sort of imaginary object, something like a picture of the sun conjured up in the mind, and then taking that sun down to the place that you can see on the picture, which is somewhere down at our solar plexus or at the deepest point of our breath. So that picture of the sun, or that feeling that the sun is present in the mind, would be something that we maintain during the meditation in order to keep the mind in place. If the mind wanders away from that, then we just bring it back again to that picture as before. If the picture disappears, then we just conjure up a new one. And if the picture changes, then we just follow it in its new form. So it can be picture, it can be feeling, but we need something to bring the mind back within the body, to stop it from its usual habit, which is to wander around, sticking to all the distractions in the outside world. Apart from that, I will mention that generally any meditation consists of a little bit of preparation. We make sure our body is relaxed first of all by scanning down through the body, relaxing all the muscles as we go. And the posture for meditation for those who like to sit on the floor would be cross-legged with the right leg up on top of the calf of the left leg, what's known as the half lotus position, or if you're sitting on a chair, to sit up fairly straight so that your breathing is fairly unimpeded and you can find the center of your body easily. The way to put your hands together would be with the right hand on top of the left hand, index finger of the right hand up against the thumb of the left hand, and just resting palm upwards in your lap. As for relaxing the mind, then generally we spend the next 5 minutes of meditation actually putting aside any of the worries and concerns that might be at the top of our mind in order to empty up some space in the mind for us to do the meditation practice. And then we work with that inner object, as I mentioned, and if you're suffering from a lot of thoughts, then try to do your best to ignore them. If ignoring them doesn't work for you, then you might find it useful to take note of that mantra, the words Samma Arahant, which you could use, or you could use an alternative if you prefer, as a way to dispel any excess thoughts from the mind. not said out loud, but just heard as if it seems to resonate from inside you during the meditation practice, for as long as there are still thoughts interrupting your meditation. Usually on a Thursday night, we meditate for about 45 minutes, so I'll lead you through that meditation now, if you'd like to make yourself comfortable for the meditation practice now. If you'd like to start by finding a comfortable position for yourself in the meditation, finding a position of poise for yourself, by which you feel you could sit for a long, long time without having to move around too much. Your hands should rest palm upwards on your lap, so that you have a fairly upright posture. And close your eyes very gently, in much the same way you might close your eyes to go to sleep. And start by taking a few deep breaths to yourself. Breathing in to the full extent of your lungs, before breathing slowly and smoothly out again. So again, you can breathe in the cool, refreshing air from around you. And as you breathe out, you may feel that you're letting go of any worries or concerns at the same time. From there, we take a few moments to make sure all the muscles of our body are properly relaxed. Starting at the top of our head and working our way gradually down through our body, relaxing each and every muscle as we go. So we start by relaxing our eyebrows and our eyelids. Once again, making sure our eyes are only very gently closed. Closed in much the same way we might close them to go to sleep. As for the muscles of our face, we allow them to become soft, perhaps smiling slightly to ourselves, but taking care that our jaw is relaxed and that we're not clenching our teeth together. From there, we relax the muscles of our neck. And if our shoulders are tense, we allow them to drop to their natural height. Before relaxing our arms, forearms, hands, and fingers. So that as our hands rest in our lap, they seem to do so only very lightly. From there, we relax all the muscles of our torso, our chest, trunk, and abdomen. Relaxing both of our legs, all the way down to our feet and our toes. So that eventually all the way from the top of our head, right the way down to the tips of our toes, there'll be no remaining part of our body with any sort of stress or tension anymore. If we do notice any tension remaining, then we do our best to relax it as far as possible, to leave us with the sensation that the whole of our body seems to melt away into the atmosphere around us, leaving no sense of discomfort in our body anymore. So that we can turn our attention inwards to the sensation of warmth, well-being and spaciousness. Spaciousness on the inside, something which by any other name we could call our state of mind. And it's also something that needs to be relaxed further to pave the way for the meditation ahead. The usual way that we relax our state of mind is by letting go of all the normal things that we tend to worry about in our lives, whether it be thoughts of work, friends, family, or studies. We put these things on one side, at least for the time that we are meditating together. If you do have particular things that seem rather important to think about, then put them on one side for now, with the thought that you can always come back to them later. Also, we let go of any regrets about the past and any plans about the future. And what that leaves us with is the present moment and the task in hand, which is a space in our lives that we have set aside for ourselves only by having taken a great deal of trouble. It's not very often that we get to recharge the batteries of our mind. It's only in such a place, together with our meditation group, that we can really focus on making sure our mind is properly relaxed. So we try to make the most of this opportunity, bringing our mind back from 1,000 different things in the outside world to a single place of stillness on the inside. And it's almost as if on the inside there is a sense of peace, somewhere at the center of our being, which was probably there all along, but which up until now we failed to notice. But as we bring our mind back from the outer distractions, we engage with this inner feeling more and more, to a point where the whole sense of peace on the inside seems to pervade the whole of our being, to the point where there's no space left in our mind for any other sort of thought. And when we feel relaxed and refreshed, both in body and in mind, very gently, using no effort at all, we can imagine that the inside of our body is just an empty space, a hollow cavity, without any organs or tissues, muscles or bones. Or as if the whole of our body had been transformed somehow into a sort of transparent bubble with nothing on the inside. And inside this empty space of our body, again very gently, without rushing the process at all, we remember back to that picture of the bright, shining sun from a few moments ago. Maybe yellow or red in color, orange or white. But this time, instead of appearing in the sky, the bright sun appears within the space of our body, shining with a cool, clear light. A light which is soft, perhaps similar to that of the full moon rather than the sun itself. In the beginning, the actual picture may not be very clear to us, but we accept it anyway. Even if it's rather vague, holding that image in our mind as continuously as we can, for as long as we can, trying to avoid letting the mind spin off onto any other distractions. However, if we do notice that the mind has become distracted, perhaps by external noise, as soon as we realize, we simply bring it gently back again to the center of the body as before. If the inner object disappears, we can always think of a new one. And apart from this, we just maintain the object as continuously as we can, for as long as we can. The other possible problem that may come up in the meditation is an excess of thought. For many people, the stream of thoughts in the mind is almost continuous, and it's hard to find a single break in the thoughts to give ourselves that peace of mind and quiet. In such a case, to open up a space between the thoughts in the mind, we make use of something called a mantra, which is basically a word we can repeat to ourselves silently, as if we hear the sound of it coming up from the center of our bright object. The traditional mantra for this school of meditation are the words Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang. And you hear the sound of those words coming up as if like a silent music from the center of ourselves, in the center of the bright object, over and over again, gently encouraging the mind to become free of thought, while at the same time linking our awareness more closely with this point in the center of the body. It's also worth mentioning that we need to be as gentle as possible with the mind for as long as we are meditating. Any trace of force, any temptation to rush, should be put on one side as something which is not helpful for our meditation progress. What we need to use in the meditation is a sense of lightness, a sense of openness, and allowing things to happen on their own, rather than feeling that we have to create experiences in the mind. So now, for a few more moments in silence, we cultivate our attention at the center of the body, keeping it on target with our bright object at our center, silently repeating to ourselves the sound of the mantra Samma Arahang as well, for as long as there are remaining thoughts in the mind. So now each to their own practice in silence for a few more moments now, until we come to the appropriate time. Continue to keep our mind on track at the center of the body all the time. Lightly, gently, and continuously. Also keeping the mind free of thought, either by ignoring any thoughts that come up in the mind, or by continuing with that mantra, the words Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, with the sound emanating from the center of the body, keeping the mind on target, remaining with the inner image, which is the focus for your mind. If your attention wanders off to the things around you, you simply bring it back again to that central point each time. If the inner object disappears, you can think of a new one. But if the inner object changes, there's no need to change it back again. You simply follow it in its new form, observing from your center, lightly, gently, and continuously. And we continue in this way for a few more moments in silence until we come to the time for our loving kindness meditation today. keep our mind always on track at the center of our body. Just stand still with whatever inner experience we have attained for ourselves so far in our meditation today. For some people, the inner experience will amount to some sort of clear, bright sphere of brightness at the center of the body. For others, it may be more like a feeling of warmth or well-being at the center of the body. Whatever sort of inner experience we have attained for ourselves, we place our attention very gently at the center of that experience, at the very center of the experience within ourselves, touching gently with the same sort of lightness as a feather floating down to touch on the surface of some water. So lightly that the feather doesn't even break the surface of the water. In the same way, we touch our attention at the center of the inner experience within ourselves. The touch of our mind at the center should be with the utmost gentleness. And what we'll soon find is that the inner sphere of the mind, or that inner experience more generally, will respond to the lightness of touch by gradually expanding outwards in size, expanding outwards until it is the same size as the whole of our own body, as if we were sitting inside a sphere of our own well-being, or a sphere of our own light. And at this point we can make a wish to ourselves that may we be well and happy, may we be free from suffering. And touching our mind again at the center of the body, the sphere of well-being or the sphere of light, then that inner experience will spread outwards beyond our own body by a process known as the spreading of loving kindness, spreading outwards in all directions like an aura or a halo, just like the moonlight shines outwards from the full moon in the night sky, or just as a block of ice spreads coolness in all directions around itself into the surrounding atmosphere. In the same way, we spread our loving kindness in all directions around ourselves, spreading the sphere of loving kindness around ourselves outwards into the room in which we are sitting for meditation, while making the wish that may all living beings here in this room be well and happy, free from all suffering. We allow the loving kindness to spread outwards further still, from the center of the body to encapsulate the whole of the building in which we are sitting for meditation, with the wish that may all living beings here in this building be well and happy, free from all suffering. And we allow loving kindness to spread outwards in all directions, outwards into the neighborhood, again with the wish that may all living beings here in this neighborhood be well and happy, free from all suffering. Further outwards in all directions to the whole of the city. And if it's easier, you can imagine it as a map seen from above. Imagine that we spread our loving kindness across the map of this city, outwards to cover the city in all directions all around. There's no part of the city not touched by the coolness and radiance of our loving kindness, while again making the wish that may all the living beings here in the city be well and happy, free from all suffering. We spread our loving kindness further outwards beyond the city limits to the whole of the country, the very borders of the country, in all directions all around. Spreading loving kindness without exception to the very borders of our country, in all directions all around. Again, with the wish that may all living beings here in this country be well and happy, free from all suffering. We spread our loving kindness outwards to all the neighboring countries too, in all directions, to living beings without exception, with the wish that they be well and happy, free from all suffering. We spread our loving kindness outwards the whole of the continent, every country on this continent, so that our loving kindness spreads its coolness and radiance to every country on this continent, with the wish that every living being on this continent be well and happy, free from suffering, live together in peace and harmony. We can extend our loving kindness to every continent of the world, whether it be Asia, Europe, Africa, North and South America, Australia or Antarctica, so that no corner of the world is not touched by the radiance and coolness of our loving kindness. Spreading our loving kindness to every place on the surface of our planet, with the wish that may every living being without exception, whether on the land, in the air or in the sea, be well and happy, free from suffering, live together in peace and harmony, so that true peace may prevail on our planet. We spread our loving kindness in all directions, all around, outwards into the universe, to the front and to the back, to the right and to the left, above and below. Extending our loving kindness outwards into the universe around us, with the wish that wherever there may be living beings, may they too be touched by our coolness and radiance of our loving kindness, in such a way that our loving kindness spreads without limits, without exceptions, outwards into the universe, the galaxies, and the cosmos around us. And having spread loving kindness in this way, we condense our awareness back down to the center of our body again, taking careful note of the brightness, the clarity, the feeling of peace and joy at the center of the body. In particular, taking mental note of the feeling of well-being at the center of our body, remembering this feeling as well as we can, because this feeling of well-being is very important for us. It represents the state of progress in meditation that we have made up until now. And if we can remember this feeling as well as we can, the next time we come to meditate again, we can start again from this feeling. Start again from this feeling, we can continue to make progress next time we come to meditate from where we left off. So for the last few moments of the meditation, we take a few moments to take a mental note of our state of progress in meditation, remembering the feeling as well as we can for a few more moments in silence. Sapi Buddha Palapata Pace Kananchayam Palang Arahantananchate Jena Rakam Bandami Sapaso Sapaputtha Nupavena Sapadhamma Nupavena Sapasangha Nupavena Satha Soti Pavanto Te. If you'd like to come to the end of your meditation for this evening, you can gradually open your eyes again. And if you feel at all uncomfortable, then slowly try changing to a more comfortable position before gradually finishing your practice. So far, so good, everyone, for this evening. Any burning questions about the meditation itself? New folks? Would you like to have a short break? No, particularly? Well, in that case, I will continue with the Dhamma talk for today, which is a continuation of a talk which I started going back a couple of weeks, which is a talk about talking, or at least the blessings of being effective in communication with others in a way that brings out the virtues by means of what you say to them. And the sort of things I talked about last time, apart from the sort of things to avoid saying, were that the sort of communication which is generally considered to be up to scratch would have 5 features to it, which we found in something known as the Vaja Sutta, where I mentioned that anything worth saying, to bring out the best in the person who hears it, should be spoken at the right time, should be truthful, should be spoken out of affection, should be spoken beneficially, and should be spoken with a mind of goodwill towards the person who hears it. And I did talk about some exceptions to that rule, which generally speaking mean that you'd be better not to say it in the first place if it doesn't come up to those standards. But today, what I have left to talk about to you is some of the exceptions to this rule and some places where we may need to go beyond the 5-star speech rule, especially for so-called high-stakes conversations, either to do with criticizing other people or talking people out of difficult situations, like, for example, depression. Yes. So, for those of us who are in management roles, we would be good to start off with our 5-star speech when talking to the people who work for us. And when we're thinking about the right time to say certain things, then of course it would be nice to wait for the opportunity to offer criticism to a person. But sometimes if such an opportunity doesn't present itself, then we might end up having to create the opportunity. And in such a situation, apart from all the 5-star criteria, which I've already mentioned, there might be an extra 2 considerations which you should bear in mind to help to make the criticism something which that person can take on board. And the extra criteria you might consider to be a little bit like the extra 2 stars on the Dubai's Burj Al Arabi hotel beyond your usual luxury 5-star hotel. So what would the extra 2 stars be in this particular case? And the first would be praising a person before you criticize them, and secondly, to smile while you are giving them criticism. So, for any piece of criticism you need to pass on to a person, it may need to be diluted by 2 pieces of genuine praise to balance up the good feeling lost as a result of the criticism. It makes use of what in management is known as the sandwich method of criticism. And the sandwich method is a form of feedback that wraps negative feedback in praise. And it means that your feedback discussion with them just starts with positive comments, is followed by the negative feedback, and then appreciative words are used again to finish off with. For example, you might mention to a person who's just given a presentation, from the start, your project was very well structured and thought out. However, there were some topics missing from the presentation that we had discussed in the last meeting. Nevertheless, your presentation was very successful, and you certainly noticed yourself that some topics were missing, and you worked them in afterwards. So aside from sandwiching, don't forget that other people have feelings, and if someone has made a lot of faults, then you shouldn't criticize them for maybe any more than 2 of those faults per day. Otherwise, you might have a resignation on your hands. Yeah. So save a few for tomorrow. Yeah. Secondly, don't forget your body language. Often the listener will respond more to your demeanor or your body language rather than what you're trying to say to them. So if you make sure you smile when you're giving someone criticism rather than shouting at them out of anger, it will reassure them that you've not taken the criticism personally, or reassure them not to take the criticism personally. Because negative feedback with a smile gives a message that I still like you, but I don't like what you've done. And it makes clear you're not criticizing them in a random way or just venting anger on them. So if you find that criticism delivered to others is proving ineffective, or it's making them angry, although anger might just be their normal response to anyone who's calling them out on their shoddiness, try to make sure the fault doesn't lie with you by checking the words you said using that 7-star effective speech criteria adapted for this feedback situation. So normally 5 stars will cover it. But there are some exceptions to this where you may need to use words in a way to sort of create a contrast in order to draw attention to certain things or perhaps to disrupt the expectations of the listener. Usually it's good to speak in a way which is polite, so don't get me wrong on that. But if that 5-star speech proves to be ineffective, it may be that speaking in the most polite possible way to every person you meet might not always be the most effective, at least for certain sorts of people. Some people cannot stand listening to flowery speech and may even criticize you because of it. Some people think that clear enunciation is affected, in which case you might need to moderate the tone of language you use. The sort of people for whom more direct speech might be more appropriate would include arrogant, complacent people, or those who are wallowing in self-pity. And notice the word self-pity as opposed to depression, because I'm going to come back to that later. People who are arrogant, they will tend to look down their nose at anyone who tries to offer them advice, not just you. So they look down at people, everyone in general, okay? So consequently, they may need to hear something more disruptive and direct in order to change themselves for the better. For those who look down not just on everyone, but just you personally, then it might sometimes be better to delegate the advice you need to give them to someone else who they do look up to. Yeah. And they would accept the advice then more readily. And lastly, for those who are wallowing in self-pity, so again, not the same as depression, it might be people who just believe the world is against them, or that they're the victim, or they can't get a break, or they never get the promotion they deserve, or that someone else has ruined their entire life. Generally, the fact they are whining about their woes to you uninvited means that it's self-pity rather than depression. And depression tends to be when people don't talk about it. Yeah. So for those wallowing in self-pity, flowery words generally would be the biblical equivalent of casting pearls before swine, and what they need to hear is a more direct appeal to snap out of it. Yeah. However, for those people who are struggling with depression, which, sad to say, is more and more common, after many years giving these sort of lectures, I started to realize that even if you distinguish between self-pity and depression, the subject is more complex than simply telling a person to snap out of it. And the same goes for a lot of self-help platitudes that might be acceptable in less critical situations. But depression, unlike self-pity, involves unwanted or unchosen barrage of negative, destructive thoughts and emotions. And it means that it's very hard for that person to engage with others or anything outside their own head. So whatever your experience is with your own mental health, it's very challenging to find the perfect thing to say to people who are struggling with depression. It's often easier to figure out what not to say. Yeah. So someone who is depressed will likely feel ashamed and mistakenly believe they should be able to overcome depression by their willpower alone. Unfortunately, ill-chosen words can contribute to their feelings of shame, driving that person deeper into depression. So when a person is depressed, they're not themselves in the way they think, feel, and act. Means that every word you say to them really counts. Assuming you want to help the person, it's natural you feel like you're walking on eggshells to avoid saying the wrong thing. Some responses you blurt out instinctively end up being unhelpful, factually incorrect, or shame-inducing. So if you can be careful, then you can offer more support and compassion to them. So, what are some of the things to avoid saying? You always seem to be happy, you don't seem to be depressed. Why would this seem to be a problem? Well, because depression doesn't look a certain way. And it's sort of like patronizing them slightly. And they'll think, if I don't look depressed, then maybe I'm not really struggling. Maybe I don't really need help. Second thing, happiness is a choice. It's all in your head. These are the sort of things you tend to get all over Tumblr and places like, or modern-day equivalents of it, for motivational advice. Generally would be good, right? Probably you heard a lot of it from this temple. But for a person with depression, it may be the wrong thing to say. This sort of thing, happiness is a choice. Choose to be happy and you will be. Yeah, all over the Tumblr and everywhere else. Usually great, right? You probably get a lot of it here. Unfortunately, for someone who is depressed, that may not be the best way forward because they didn't choose to be depressed. It's not like they were choosing how they felt in order to get depressed. Therefore, to be told it's like your fault or snap out of it is not really going to help them at all. So it's not just something that they can let go of, or it's going to go away by itself. Saying that it will just change if you wait long enough, that it may not change if it's depression. For people in general who are just feeling pity on themselves, okay, if you wait long enough, the feeling goes away. But for people with depression, it doesn't just go away by itself. Often it's an imbalance in the brain. So just saying stay strong or things will get better may not be at all helpful for them. Saying that everyone gets a little down sometimes, maybe you're just one of them. They may end up feeling they're just overreacting. And if you say they're acting selfish, well, it's like putting the blame on the victim. So none of these are helpful things to say. One more? Trying to cheer them up by saying, well, look how great your life is. It can't be that bad. It could be worse. You think you have it bad. Compare yourself to some people who have it worse than you. Comparing themselves to someone else might miss the point, because it's how they feel. And often this sense of feeling they shouldn't deserve to feel depressed can be the problem. You could say, just try eating better and exercising. There may be some merit in that, because sometimes working out does have quite a good effect. But it would be better if they heard that from a professional than from you, probably. Saying everyone's going through something, well, comparing themselves with someone else may not be helpful. And they may feel a lack of empathy because they're looking to you for that empathy. Saying, oh, you just need a drink. You just need a drink. Cheer you up. What do you reckon? Actually, it can add to the problem, because drinks are depressants in themselves, so it actually adds to the problem. Saying cheer up. It's like telling someone with rheumatoid arthritis to stop hurting. So if you consider depression to be an illness, then you shouldn't say anything to someone with depression that you would say to someone with another illness. And saying many people go through worse, it's like that doesn't matter to them. What matters is how they feel. So are there some actions you can do to help them? Sometimes there's a temptation. This is like before you say anything. This is like your attitude towards them. How to avoid treating them in a way that's not going to add to the problem. Firstly, if they're depressed, don't take it personally. Don't you take it personally. Because sometimes you feel the fact they're depressed is somehow like a slight against you somehow. So remind yourself that it's about what they're going through, not something to do with you. Some people feel like part of the blame. Secondly, don't think you know better than them. This is probably the origin of this phrase, I can't imagine what you must be going through, which is quite often used in counseling. Because you can't put yourself completely in another person's shoes, ever. Even if you've had depression yourself before, your feeling of depression might be rather different from the next person's. Thirdly, don't avoid them. Sometimes a person with depression is not fun to be with. So your natural inclination is just to let them get on with it. But that may be, again, rather selfish, because actually, if they're ready, they do need someone to reach out to, or someone just to be there and listen to them. In fact, it might be their only hope. Don't boss them about or take charge, because the support they need needs to come from their own inclination. And don't compare their experiences to someone else's, even if you've had some experience of it yourself. So, what can you say? Nothing? Well, we've said all the things you shouldn't say, so that's a lot of things you already said nothing about. Like, I think it's 3 slides worth or whatever. Well, there are a few things which possibly could be applicable in your artful and effective speech for people suffering from depression. Firstly, if they say anything at all, things that you can usefully say back are, "Thank you for telling me." So it encourages them to speak. Yeah? "I'm here if you want to talk. I still love you. You're important to me. You're not alone. Have you spoken to a doctor, a therapist, or your family about these feelings? This must be hard for you, but you're doing the right thing by talking about it. What more can I do to help?" That sort of thing. So opening up to let them speak would be the way to go. So it is a little bit of a different situation from all the other things I've said before, which is mostly about saying the right thing, saying the clever thing, saying the encouraging thing, chipping in with little platitudes about happiness and this sort of thing. Rather a different kettle of fish. But if you know the rules of the game, then maybe you can be the person to say the effective or the useful and compassionate thing in that situation. So, what more did the Buddha have to say about talk? In Buddhism, useful sort of talk is considered to be talk about virtuous things by a person who exemplifies the things they're talking about. And the Buddha taught that 10 types of conversation are praiseworthy in the case that a person not only talks about them but also exemplifies them, whether it be wanting little, contentment, love of seclusion, love of solitude, striving energetically, being self-disciplined, loving to meditate, being wise, having attained liberation, and having attained the seeing and knowing of liberation. In other words, Buddhism advocates talk of virtues where a person walks the talk. And some other specialist ones also from the Buddhist scriptures is, if you're thinking about taking up a job of being a peace envoy, then you need to have extra special talking skills, as you can imagine. Probably more than 5-star speech or 7-star speech or talking to people with depression. We have 8 here. So, encouraging peace and harmony by the things you say. According to the Buddha, anyone who's dedicated to encourage harmony between communities needs to have 8 characteristics. And if you are not a national ambassador, you might even find this list useful for brokering harmony between families or communities or arbitration of any sort. So, firstly, you need to be able to listen to others' opinions rather than denying others any different point of view. Some people like to hear only the sound of their own voice and don't let anyone else get a word in edgeways. This means that before becoming a good speaker, you first need to train yourself to listen to what other people say. whether what the other person's saying is right or wrong. At the very least, you need them to get the chance to say what they have to say in order to know what their grievances are. Secondly, when you do come to speak, you must be able to capture and hold your listener's attention. So if they're not serious about listening to you, then maybe it's not quite the time to say something yet. You have to wait until you have their attention. So you do need to be more than just a good listener. Thirdly, you need to be able to set the boundaries for what you have to say to probably the minimum. Being long-winded is never an advantage. And rambling speeches are a recipe for political negotiations that never reach a conclusion. Number 4, you need to be able to remember everything you have to say. If you lose your train halfway through a sentence, it will leave the listener unconvinced. Number 5, you have to understand the details of everything you have to say. Especially if you're a delegate of some sort, then you need to be able to answer the questions that your listeners might have. Number 6, you need to be able to make sure other people have understood what you've said. And it may be necessary to make complex things simple for them to be able to understand. Number 7, you need to be able to maybe cut out, to focus on the necessary parts of your argument while cutting out all the rest. And you may need to avoid any tendency you have to start arguments. So whether you're Liz Truss or Anthony Blinken, you better make sure you're not a short-tempered person being sent unless you're planning to start a war. And the Buddha had quite a lot to say about ambassadors. This is from the Vinaya or Julavaka. The Buddha said that an ambassador is someone who, even in the company of the harsh-spoken, can remain unscathed and unruffled, makes no mistake in their use of words, doesn't conceal information, has the ability to alleviate the doubts of others, and who is not angered by questioning. You may have heard of some institutions of public speaking, perhaps, such as, where do they train people to give speeches? Toastmasters? Dale Carnegie? Well, you might be interested to know they also have a Buddhist version of this. Buddhist principles of public speaking. And it's based on something called the 3-sound system. Doesn't mean you just say 3 sounds. It means you have soundness in 3 different things, namely body, speech, and mind, in the way you speak to others. So sound body would include all aspects of your body language, I suppose, including things like smiling, being easy on the eye generally, in terms of personality and gestures. Yeah? Sound speech would mean speech that's easy on the ear, so 5-star speech, as I've already mentioned, but also intonation and dramatic pauses for effect. And sound mind would include exemplifying the virtues that you're talking about. So, since Buddhist public speaking isn't just about being understood or believed, but it also should be inspiring the listener to do good deeds as well. So being pleasant to the mind would include appropriate choice of subject, being prepared, having one's thoughts organized, and structuring the speech into 3 parts: an introduction, main body, and a conclusion. And I went to one of these schools of so-called diplomatic speaking when I used to live in Thailand back in 1991 or so on. but I believe the director, called Mr. Jompon Supap, passed away some years ago. I don't know if the school still exists or not. Yeah. Anyway, a story to finish off with. And again, from the Jataka stories. Number 315. And it's a story about 4 teenagers or young boys who were sons of merchants in the city of Benares. And with nothing better to do, these young men were sitting at a crossroads, and they made a bet amongst themselves about who had the best powers of persuasion, and decided to test out their communication skills by seeing who could persuade a butcher who's coming along the road in his cart to give them the best cut of meat from his cart. Yeah? So, sort of competition. So, the first one to go, he shouted out to the butcher, "Hey, my man, give me some meat." And the butcher was a kindly man, but since the words were not very sweet to his ears, he threw the boy some skin and bone. And everyone asked him why he only gave the boy skin and bone. And he replied that skin and bone are tough and have no taste, just like the words of the boy who had requested them. So they came to the second one. The second one called out, "Elder brother, please give me some of your meat to eat." So probably take note of the elder brother and the word please here. And because the second son had called him respectfully elder brother, the butcher cut off a choice joint of meat and gave it to him. A third one said, "Oh, my father, please give me some of your meat to eat." And because the third son had had the respect to call him his father, he cut out a savory piece of meat for the boy as a gift. But finally, it came to the fourth one, who happened to be the Bodhisattva or the Buddha-to-be, and this young man referred to the butcher as "my friend." When the butcher heard his words, this appellation felt just right to him, because he and the young man were so close in age, and the young man's words seemed the most sincere of the 4 boys. So the third one had called him father, but really that was a bit too much like flattery. But hearing the word friend, the butcher decided to give the whole of his cart of meat to the fourth one. And the fourth one didn't just say friend, but he treated the butcher like a friend as well. And he took him all the way back to his own house, and he said, "Seeing as you've been so generous to me, you can stay in my home if you like. I have a reasonable amount of wealth to my name, therefore if any of your extended family are in distress, just tell me and I will help them too." And in fact, he was able to settle a few debts for the butcher's relatives as well. And the butcher and that boy stayed friends for the rest of their lives. So what was so great about the fourth one's speech as compared to the other 3? Sincerity, appropriateness, and not only that, he actually made the words true by putting them into practice. So of the 4, that was considered to be the most effective and quality speech of all the 4 that we heard. So in conclusion, on the subject of the right thing to say, we need to be very careful in our choice of what to say, because choice of words can build or destroy the listener's morale. Truly effective communication in most situations requires the 5-star speech, which are true, said out of compassion, useful, polite, and said at the right time. Yeah? 5-star speech. However, when it comes to criticizing other people, it may need to be upgraded to 7-star speech, like I mentioned, And if you're talking to someone who seems to be depressed, then you may even need to take more care than that. Don't forget, a good speaker also needs to know when to stop talking and start listening. And as I mentioned, with the virtues of the good ambassador. And sometimes the most important things we say might be said when we're keeping our mouth shut. And because sometimes the things left unsaid are more important, can be more important. Yes. For those who are new to meditation today, I would encourage you to take what you have learned from the meditation and meditate further at home. Normally I recommend 20 minutes a day if you'd like to see some progress in your meditation. So try to remember the meditation that you practice today and practice it at the time of day which is convenient for you and when you won't have too many interruptions. Possibly first thing in the morning or maybe last thing at night if you are someone who has problems sleeping. To help you in this, there's now an app for that called MindGem, which you can use to listen to audio guidance for your meditation as you are meditating along to it, which is free of charge, and you can load it onto your phone. Here at the Meditation Center, we have classes every Tuesday and Thursday evening. Generally, the Tuesday night class has a little bit of a shorter meditation. On Thursdays, then we have 45 minutes. Apart from this, there are still Zoom meditations online every Saturday, which you might like to follow, just an hour long between 7 and 8 p.m. And there's a full moon meditation on Saturday, the 16th of April, on the theme of the Day of Gratitude, which is online, and I believe also we'll do a little candle lighting ceremony here as well. I noticed there's now also an in-person one Sunday after next as well on the 10th for the Thai full moon, which generally has a lot of food going as well, which you might be interested to collect a program for that on the way out. Apart from that, for young men, there is a ordination European-wide during the month of June, where you can try out being a monk for a whole month, or possibly for the first 2 weeks of that month, depending on how much time you have free. And the next meditation retreat for the weekend here is coming up between the 8th and 10th of July. So for today, I think I will leave it there, but there is an opportunity for any questions, comments, or feedback if anyone would like to speak up. So may all of you be endowed with effective and 5-star speech at the very least in all your dealings with those around you who you communicate with in your life.